Because, ladies and gentlemen, I have to do something that I've done in the past, but I haven't had to do but so much in my career. I just feel compelled to do it today. And that's to issue an apology. There's several people that we all owe apologies to, and I'll put myself at the front of the list. But none more so than the apology that I owe to Kyrie Irving. But this is not about him, the basketball player. This is about him, the man. The reality is that Kyrie Irving, no matter what we think, may have been more right than we have given him credit for, and unquestionably was more vilified than he deserved. And ladies and gentlemen, it starts with me. Keep telling y'all before on many, many occasions, I'm a man. If I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. But when it comes to Kyrie Irving, I can't apologize strongly enough.
So as we see, Stephen A. Smith apologize to Kyrie Irving after years of criticizing him over the COVID vaccine. And I'm going to say something that a whole lot of people probably aren't going to disagree with. An apology is a good start, but sometimes an apology isn't enough. You know, during the pandemic, people lost jobs. People lost opportunities. People were called selfish, irresponsible, crazy, conspiracy theorists. And some people were treated like they didn't deserve to participate in society because they made a different medical decision. Kyrie Irving lost games, man, lost millions of dollars and became one of the biggest targets in sports because he refused to comply with New York Knicks vaccine mandate. Stephen A. Smith admitted that after watching Dr. Anthony Fauci recent congressional testimony, he felt he owed Kyrie and others an apology, and even acknowledged that Kyrie may have been treated far worse than he deserved. He also named people like Aaron Rodgers, Novak Djokovic, Bryson DeChambeau, and Conor McGregor as others, who deserves an apology, right? Now, let me be clear, because people love putting words in your mouth. This isn't about celebrating people getting sick. This isn't about saying every scientist was evil. Stephen A. himself even said there is still a lot we don't know about the pandemic, and he's right about that, right? But here's my issue. Where was this energy when people were getting attacked? Where was this humility when people were losing careers? It's easy to apologize after the storm passes, right? Leadership is standing up while the storm is still going. That's what courage looks like. See, I was living it too. I work in both the medical field and the film industry. There were places I couldn't go, productions I couldn't work with, and opportunities I couldn't take without following the rules that were in place at the time. I didn't like it. But like millions of other people, I felt like I had no choice if I wanted to continue providing for myself and my family and my team. That's why this conversation matters a lot to me. It isn't just about Kyrie. It's about every ordinary person who never had a microphone or an ESPN platform to defend themselves. Let me tell you what I respect, or what I would respect. Stephen A., don't stop at an apology. Bring Kyrie on your show. Sit down with him. Let him explain why he made the decision he made. Have the difficult conversation with him in front of the same audience that watched you criticize him. Because if the criticism was public, then the restoration should be public too, right? That's what accountability looks like. We live in a culture where people are quick to speak and slow to admit they were wrong. But Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of fools seems to right them, but the wise listen to advice. Wisdom requires humility. Wisdom says, maybe I didn't have every answer. And that's the problem with this world. We started treating scientists, politicians, television personalities like Stephen A. Smith, and celebrities like they were God almost. They're not. They're human beings. They can be wrong. You know, I could be wrong. You could be wrong. That's why my faith has never been in a politician, a news anchor, a scientist, or a celebrity. My faith is in God and God alone. Hebrews 13:8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Thank you, Jesus. Governments change, experts change, policies change, headlines change. God doesn't change. That's why you never built your life on people. You build it on truth. Let me say something else that may make some people out there uncomfortable. One of the biggest lessons from the pandemic wasn't even about vaccines. It was about how quickly fear can divide people. Friends turned on friends. Families turned on families. Stopped speaking to each other. Co-workers judged one another. Instead of listening, we started labeling each other. You know, if you questioned something, you were called ignorant. If you agreed with it, somebody else called you brainwashed. Everybody out there became enemies overnight. That's not healthy. That's not wisdom. That's not how God called us to treat people. And James 1:19 tells us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Imagine how different those years would have been if more people had followed that verse instead of trying to shout to each other, screaming at each other. So yes, I give Stephen A. credit for apologizing. A lot of public figures never apologize at all. But I also believe accountability means continuing the conversation, giving people who were publicly criticized the opportunity to speak, and making sure we learn from the mistakes of the past instead of pretending they never happened. Because if we don't learn from history, history has a funny way of repeating itself. And that's a fact. God bless you, and I'll see you on the next video. Deuces.